All right. Debt by Natural Causes is back. This is another video update. It's been a few months, I think over 3 months. And so a lot has happened, and I have a lot of information to share with everyone. And, the Substack continues to grow steadily, slowly. Um, and I really appreciate all the direct messages and the emails I'm getting from people. Um, the situation continues to be really dire for naturopathic and acupuncture programs, um, but there's still a lot that's going to play out in the next few months. And I'm kind of here just chronicling it, somewhat live blogging it. I'm going to, continue to do that. Um, and a big motivation of that is just making sure everybody has the best information possible, especially students are, kept up on what's really going on. So today I'm going to talk about loan caps, private loans, the do no harm earnings test, the PIMA closure, and what's being done to salvage acupuncture in Oregon. So let's talk about the loan caps first. So let me pull this up. Okay, so I'm in the podcast studio at Metro East Community Media Center. So I'm kind of experimenting with this. And I know a lot of people just listen to this on the podcast, but I do have a visual pulled up here. And so this was a post in April about the loan caps final rules. So the Department of Education decided to keep the list of professional degrees eligible for $50,000 annually they decided to keep that group very narrow. There's only 11 degree programs that would qualify for the $50,000. And acupuncture and naturopathic medicine are not in that group, meaning they are in the lower group and they qualify for $20,500. That is not enough to run a school. That is not enough for students to attend those programs. And so that would be pretty much the end of most programs in acupuncture and naturopathic medicine. Now, there is a lawsuit to challenge those definitions and to try and get more programs into the $50,000 category, because this is affecting all sorts of graduate degree healthcare programs like PETs, physician associates, nurse practitioners, occupational therapists, advanced degrees in nursing. So there is a challenge to these, but currently what's set to take effect July 1st is that very narrow list. So I had a post about this on April 30th, and see, I shared a couple parts of their rationale. So regarding, the ND degree, the department declines to include the Doctor of Naturopathic Medicine in the list of professional degrees, as we explained in the notice of proposed rulemaking. Congress borrowed and codified the department's definition of professional degree in the definition of professional student and they give a reference which includes a 3-part operative test, among other requirements. Under the HEA, the Higher Education Act's tool of statutory construction, ND cannot be included in a list of professional degrees because it does not pass all parts of the operative test. As we explained, the department determined that an ND would not satisfy the first and third part of the professional degree definition because Less than half of states license NDs, and some states ban the practice of naturopathy altogether. As such, the ND is not required for entry into the profession, and licensure is not generally required. Okay, so they declined to include the ND degree in the $50,000 category. And then later on in the document, they talk about acupuncture. Although licensure and the completion of a graduate level master's or doctoral program are required to legally practice as a licensed acupuncturist, these credentials are not the only way people enter the field of acupuncture. In many states, related modalities such as dry needling performed by a physical therapist and medical acupuncture performed by physicians with comparatively short supplemental training allow individuals to work in overlapping therapeutic spaces without completing the full accredited AHM curriculum. As a result, the profession has multiple entry points, and not all of those require the rigorous multi-year clinical education that licensed acupuncturists must complete. As we stated in the NPRM, Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, and similar to occupational therapy, the AHM would not satisfy the professional degree definition because the degree is not specifically required to enter the field. Okay, so that's pretty interesting because for naturopathic medicine, they're saying, well, it's not actually this national level credential. It's not required in all the states, and so we're not going to grant it the higher cap. And then for acupuncture, they're saying there's actually multiple entry points into what they say is very similar, I guess, to acupuncture. They say they give dry needling. So that's just the kind of a taste of their rationale. But there is a lawsuit to challenge that rationale and to either, I guess, put a halt to that or get more categories, more degree programs included in it. So Oregon's Attorney General Rayfield is suing U.S. Department of Education over student loan rule limiting access to student loans for professional degree programs. I'll just read the first part of this May 19th article. Coalition challenges unlawful rule that could restrict access to advanced education and worsen workforce shortages. Attorney General Dan Rayfield and a coalition of attorneys general are challenging the U.S. Department of Education over a new rule that unlawfully limits access to federal student loans for students pursuing professional degree programs, including many healthcare and other critical workforce fields. In a lawsuit filed today, the coalition pushed back on a recently finalized ED rule that narrows the federal definition of professional degree and imposes restrictions Congress did not authorize. Okay, so they're saying like this rule, the way that the Department of Education interpreted the law, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, is not correct and not lawful. And these rules are set to take effect July 1st, in less than a month, because today is June 6th when I'm recording this. And so it's kind of up in the air what's going to happen. I maybe a judge or the courts will say, you're right, it's too harmful to these parties, and so we're going to delay the loan caps entirely, which seems odd to me since the loan caps are clearly in the law passed by Congress. Or maybe they could say, okay, all of these professional graduate degrees can have the $50,000 cap until we figure this out. As I posted out before, the schools have already some programs have already gotten around this $50,000 cap or $20,500 cap by starting a cohort before July 1st. So they're trying to bring in a group of people under the current system, which would be um, the high direct loan limit plus grad plus for cost of living. So they're trying to get they need the funding, so they're trying to get one more group in that would take kind of shore up this year's revenue. The problem with that for students is you only get the legacy provision for staying underneath that old system is only for 3 academic years. So it was really designed for students to be able to finish their program. Um, and if you're coming in on the summer for, let's say, a 3.5 year program, so you start in June, and then I guess past that, you have 3 more academic years to finish. There's not really any room for, like, if something unexpected were to happen and you had to take a leave of absence, I'm not sure that you could come back. There might be some technical rule where if it's like an approved leave of absence, maybe you can come back. But as far as I understand it, the 3 academic years is pretty, like, that's the cutoff date. So if you had to take a year off for some reason, I'm not sure you could actually come back and get the full loan access. It's just really risky. And I think that people should understand that because you could get stranded with a high loan balance, and then you would have to, I guess, if you wanted to finish, you would have to go take out a private loan, which we're also going to talk about here. So that's kind of where the loan caps stand for now. Is I guess to be determined. Probably we'll see something before July 1st and a little bit more definition. The other thing that's important to, I think, understand about the loan caps is that there's a lifetime limit of $257,000. So not only do you have the, let's say, best case scenario, ND acupuncture gets the 50,000. So that's 50,000 annually, $200,000 total for that graduate degree. But the lifetime aggregate limit is 257,000. So if you took out more than 57,000 for undergraduate to, like, get the prerequisites to get your bachelor's degree, so that you could apply to these programs, if you borrowed more than 57,000 for that, that would actually eat into the 200,000 that you would be eligible for. So I think that's another thing for people to understand is that it's not necessarily even that much money. It's not even up the totals, and the 20,500 is annually and $100,000 total. But if you're only doing a 3-year program, that's just 3 years of 20,500, or a 4-year program is 4 years of 20,500. And if you're doing 3.5, that's kind of prorated for that half year. You don't get 20,500 to use for 1 quarter or for half a year. So it's quite strict, and I think the public's kind of catching up. There seems to be a lot of news coverage about this with the lawsuits, and there's huge groups affected by this, like nurses and PTs and physician assistants. So there's a lot of there's a lot of juice behind opposing this, and so it's gonna be really interesting, and maybe acupuncture and naturopathic medicine can kind of grab on to that larger cause and get the 50,000. Even 50,000 isn't really enough, um, because if you look at like the first year tuition for those types of programs, it's something like 30 to 40,000 in tuition alone, and those are graduate degree credits, so they're generally like twice as expensive as undergraduate degree credits. But you got that tuition, and the thing that really makes it hard is the uh, living expenses, which is something like 35,000 annually, um, in Portland. Uh, so you're looking at like 70,000 cost of attendance total, and that's what people were borrowing, with the direct loan plus the grad plus, and that's just totally unsustainable. It's that amount of funding is not getting repaid, um, and but the programs and the schools have come to rely on that amount of funding, and they would raise tuition each year, and that's what everything's been based off of, is that level of student debt, unpayable student debt, and so this is really challenging the entire um, setup, the entire ecosystem. Once you remove that funding, it doesn't work. It doesn't function, and that's what has to kind of, I think, sink in for everybody, and we have to kind of see the the budgeting, see the audits, not a year later, and you can kind of see just in higher education in general, things are already in decline, and you have schools closing or merging. Bastyr and NUNM were going to merge, but then it got called off. I still think a merger, is probably needed if you want to preserve these programs, but that's just one piece of it, because that not only do you have the current budgetary restraints, but then you have the loan caps starting July 1st. Um, and then you have the earnings test starting July 2027, which we'll talk about also. But I want to touch on this issue of actually private loans, because I think that's an important thing for people to um, understand. So let me pull this up, something I found interesting. Because basically everybody gets that there's not enough money in federal student loans to make it through a program. And so there's some speculation that, well, maybe students can just take out a private loan on top of a maxed out federal loan, which is just crazy to me, for most programs, especially given that, um, we're going to be able to look at the uh, earnings, and private lenders will be able to see that there's no way that graduates can, pay back the loans. So interesting now on NUNM's website, federal direct student loan. NUNM currently processes federal direct Stafford loans through the federal government and private alternative loans. That's a new addition recently. Interesting. So if you scroll down, private alternative loans, if you're interested in exploring alternative loan options beyond federal student aid, you can review a range of private lending options available to students. Okay, what's this? So fast choice. Interesting. And there you have it. Private lending for higher education. Welcome to Fast Choice. So this is going to allow you to compare your options. You have to enter your name and, I guess, student ID number. And down here at the bottom, you can see Fast Choice powered by Nelnet. Okay, so Nelnet is a student loan servicer. So now apparently they're also involved in not just federal loans. Maybe they were before too, but they're involved in private student loans too. And I think this is kind of the logical, just landing place of our educational system now, which is that it was, working off of it was all operating off of um, private. Oh, excuse me. It was all operating off of student debt for so long. So it's just basically like kicking the can down the road, right? Okay, we wanted these nice things. We want education, but of course, people entering into the system don't have the resources often to pay for the education. And so instead of society funding that in a rational, reasonable way, um, everyone's just, I guess you could say like society decided, but that I'm not sure that we really have much democratic, um, actual authentic influence over this. But it's just been funded through placing the burden on individual student debtors, and kind of ignoring those outcomes and ignoring the fact that a lot of it's not just not getting paid back, and sort of having a, I guess, odd selection of different ways of getting it paid back, like scholarships, or after the fact work commitments, or PSLF options. If you do the right thing, if you do the right type of job, then you're eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Um, so it's just been very stilted and weird and confusing. And then you had all these changes with the SAVE plan and the Biden administration, and that was challenged, and now we have all these large changes with loan caps, and the repayment plans are changing too. The main income-based repayment plan is the RAP plan, which is instead of 25 years of payments, you now need to make um, 30 years of payments before you get that canceled, and it's still um, cancellation amount is still taxable income, so you're gonna have to pay taxes on it. Um, but we've kind of now that that's failed, now we're going to try to go back to private student loans, which was the situation before Grad Plus, except now everything's way more expensive and the cost of living is totally unaffordable. And it's just this really illustrative, sad commentary on where we're at. And I think even if students have okay credit, and even if the lender will make that loan, the terms aren't going to be great. I don't think you're going to have as much protections as the federal student loans. You won't have access to public service loan forgiveness. They're going to go after you. They're going to garnish your wages if you can't pay it back. And it's just, I think it's just a terrible idea. A really strong message I want to put out there is do not take out private student loans on top of maxed out federal student loans for a naturopathic medicine or acupuncture program. It's just objectively, like, there's enough evidence out there saying like that's a terrible idea, and it's a huge risk for any new students coming in. Um, Perhaps if you end up in a situation where you have no other option to finish, um, then maybe that might be worth it. But if you're coming into this, just please research this deeply, and please don't like have a loved one co-sign on something like this, and bring them into it, because that could also affect other people's finances in your family. But yeah, that's where we're at. And kind of knew that was where it was going to headed, but you know, now we're here. Um, so, oh, and if you want to learn more about private student loans, you can go to the Project on Predatory Student Loans website, PPSL. They've got a lot of good resources on that. But just, yeah, please do research it and understand it. Um, and you can message me or email me, and I'll tell you don't do it. Because you gotta protect yourself and your finances, because the schools are businesses. They're trying to pull in new people. They're desperate for funding. They're desperate for revenue, and they will, you know, contort around any kind of methodologies that can possibly get them the money they need to survive, for, I mean, just year by year, just hand to mouth at this point. Okay, so let's talk about the earnings test. The Department of Education released updated earnings for some programs, and those are on the college scorecard website. And so we can kind of compare the bachelor's degree. We can compare the earnings for master's and doctoral degrees to bachelor's degrees. And that's the July 2027 earnings test. And that's what will be published around July 2027. And so I wrote a post about this. It ended up being pretty popular. So let me pull this up here. So there was, during the rulemaking committee where they were talking about the earnings test, there was this uh, slide showing that 98% of alternative medicine master's degree students are in programs that are likely to fail the earnings test. And that was actually on the Department of Education slide. So clearly they're seeing this, and everybody, I think, has kind of acknowledged like the results of the earnings test will be bad for um, alternative medicine master's degree students, which is largely acupuncture programs. Um, so there's a couple great tables out there that kind of grab that earnings data and then compare it to a threshold, a bachelor's degree threshold, and say, okay, does it look like this program is going to pass or not? And all of the majority of them, of course, fail, as the Department of Education was showing. But I think it's kind of helpful to just see the names of the schools and like see the programs and see that this is very programmatically specific. So in the current data, right, you have AIMC master's degree, median earnings 41,000, earnings threshold 61,000. Okay, so that's very far away from a bachelor's degree threshold, so it's unlikely to pass in July 2027. I'll just scroll through this. AOMA 29,000 didn't pass. ATOM master's degree 20,000 didn't pass. Best year doctoral 53,000 compared to about 62,000 didn't pass, or it'd be 54 compared to 62,000 didn't pass. Best year masters 45,000 to about 62,000 didn't pass. I think best year has already discontinued all acupuncture programs except for the doctoral completion. California Institute of Integral Studies doctoral. Um, I don't think that was an acupuncture program, but 45,000 versus 62,000, so that's a fail. Colorado Chinese Medicine University Masters 42,000 versus 62,000, that's a fail. Taoist Traditions College of Chinese Medical Arts master's degree 20,000 versus 55,000, so not even close on that one. Dragon Rises masters 33 versus 52, that's a fail. East West College of National Medicine first professional degree 35,000 versus 52,000, not going to pass, or unlikely to pass. Eastern School of Acupuncture master's degree, unlikely to pass. EDP, University of Puerto Rico, master's degree, very close, but around 23,000, so maybe won't pass. Maryland University of Integrative Health, doctoral, not likely. Master's degree from that school, unlikely. MCPHS, master's degree, not likely. Midwest College of Oriental Medicine, not likely. Master's degree. NUHS doctoral, not likely. NUHS master's, not likely. First professional degree, not likely. Northwest master's, not likely. OCOM, which is no longer around. Master's degree wouldn't have passed, or unlikely to pass. Pacific College Health and Science, first professional degree, no. Master's degree, no. PIMA, first professional degree, which is now closed. But it was about 26,000 versus 57,000, unlikely to pass. Sonoran, first professional degree, that does look like it will pass. And I believe that's the ND program under first professional degree. So maybe there's a chance there. Southwest Acupuncture College, master's degree, unlikely. St. Catherine University, master's degree, does look like it's passing. That was not, that was different than acupuncture. University of Bridgeport, doctoral, unlikely. Virginia University Integrated Medicine, master's, unlikely. One Institute, graduate certificate, unlikely. And then One Institute, graduate studies, master's, unlikely. So out of that list, it's like 2 out of the 32 programs are likely to, only 2 are likely to pass the July 2027 earnings test. So that's where you get the like 98% of students are in programs that are projected to fail. And so you can't really change it at this point because the earnings snapshot is taken 4 years after people graduate. And so any change that was made now, right, those people would have to enter the workforce and work for 4 years before that was captured. Like if you started some sort of great partnership with a hospital system and your graduates started getting jobs there and they were making more than a bachelor's degree, then that would not affect the earnings test until 4 years later. So all that's kind of baked in at this point. I guess it's possible there's some sort of legal challenge that'll come up, but as it looks now, it looks like the masters and many masters and the majority of masters and doctoral degree programs will fail the July 2027 earnings test. So yeah, it's something to keep in mind, especially I think if you're like a prospective student considering going into an acupuncture program. I think it's wise to wait for a year and see how the program does and see if it passes the earnings test. Because what happens is if you fail, then the program has 120 days to choose a teach out option or to not choose a teach out option. If you choose the teach out option, then there's no new students admitted, but your current students get to keep access to the federal loans and they can finish. Now, even if you choose the teach out option, I'm I'm not sure even those students finishing would be difficult because you're not going to have any new students coming in. And then, like, a year later, after one cohort's graduated, you again don't have new students coming in. So you've got like a huge drop in revenue to sustain the school. So maybe you could do some sort of like accelerated option and try to get everybody through in a shorter time frame. But even choosing the teach out option doesn't necessarily mean everybody's going to be able to finish at that school. And because this is happening nationwide all at the same time, um, your transfer options might become very limited very quickly. And you would have to, for example, relocate out of state, or maybe you would have to, um, I don't know, do some sort of like like you could do online classes and then maybe do some sort of low residency clinical training where like everybody came in for a week or something and did a bunch of clinical training. So it's possible to like find some creative solutions, but it's going to be, I think it's going to be a mess. So I would recommend that people just wait. If you're on the fence, just wait until July 2027. You can ask any program you're interested in. And this is for current students too. Like, ask about the earnings data. Say, like, what are you predicting that you're going to pass this July 2027 earnings test? And why do you say that, right? And if you pull up that Department of Education data and pull up the college scorecard data and say, well, here's one source of data and it looks like you're not going to pass. So will you commit to the teach out option so that we students can maintain our access to federal student loans so that we can finish? Because the schools should be doing what's best for the students, not what is kind of based on some delusion that they have in their brains about what is actually realistically possible at this point. So, speaking about teach out options, let's talk about PIMA, Phoenix Institute of Herbal Medicine and Acupuncture. It recently had its accreditation terminated by ACOM. So let me pull up, see if I can do this letter here. So you can look at this official letter. And so this was April 22nd to the president. And this has got a little bit complicated because there was a state licensing board involved, some kind of multiple parties involved. So effective 25 February 2026, ACOM took adverse action against PIMA, terminated its institutional and programmatic accreditation. And during that same period, the Arizona State Board for Private Post-Secondary Education, AZPPSE, was engaged in its internal process for terminating PIMA's license to operate an accredited vocational and degree-granting private post-secondary educational institution in Arizona, wanting to minimize harm to PIMA's currently enrolled students by allowing them to complete their spring 2026 term of enrollment. AZPPSE and PIMA informally agreed that if PIMA satisfied certain conditions, it could continue its state license and continue operations in Arizona until April 22nd, 2026. Upon PIMA's written request, and with PIMA and ACOM both wanting to protect the public and act in the best interests of PIMA's students, ACOM agreed to, quote, postpone, unquote, the application of its 25 February 2020 adverse action until April 2026, provided PIMA agreed to certain terms and conditions. Okay, great. So it was going to get terminated in February, but they said, all right, we'll let you finish up and keep going until April. PIMA, by its president and its board chair, executed a waiver terms and conditions agreement dated 17 March 2026, confirming specifically that PIMA would, quote, voluntarily surrender its license number AVD-00116 to operate an accredited vocational and degree granting private post-secondary education institution in Arizona on or before 22 April 2026, that in no event would PIMA's accreditation status with ACOM extend beyond 22 April 2026, and that PIMA voluntarily forfeits and waives any and all rights and claims it might have now and in the future to dispute or contest its loss of ACOM accreditation in any legal or regulatory form, unquote. All right, so they had an agreement and commission action consistent with the terms of the 17 March 2026 waiver terms and conditions agreement. PIMA's institutional and programmatic accreditation status with the commission is terminated effective 22 April 2026. Okay, so they were basically saying, here's we're gonna cancel this. It was agreed upon in March, but it's gonna be canceled in April. And okay, maybe, I guess that's the best situation. Unfortunately, that's not totally how things worked out. I wrote about this in a post recently. And so, unfortunately, on March 19th, the landlord retook possession of the premises located at some of PIMA's facilities, 301 East Bethany Home Road, Suites A100, A119, A135, A201, A205, Phoenix, Arizona, 85012. So the students got locked out of the facilities, and the landlord retook possession on March 19th. So I'm not totally sure how that all worked out, but it was not a great situation for students. I know that there was a transfer option offered at the only other acupuncture school, but that school was about an hour's drive away. But there was an option to something like do classes 2 days a week. So that's good that this, at least there was an option, a teach out option, like within driving distance, you know. But that school itself, I think it was ASAOM, also is having financial difficulties, and so they were under review by that same Arizona board for financial stability, and they're being kind of monitored, I think, by that board, and so that the transfers will, increase. It'll help ASAOM briefly for a year, maybe a little bit more, but then they're going to be back to the same, overall decline in the market. That's just a huge shift, not only in acupuncture, but in higher education in general. So we're in a generational shift. It's a declining market. There's fewer students. There's a lower participation rate percentage of those fewer students. The cost of living is unaffordable. The loan caps are capping the amount of federal aid available. And just people in general are, I think, questioning what's the value of this, right? What's the ROI? And in fact, it's interesting because the NWCCU, the institutional creditor that accredits a lot of schools in Oregon, is actually revising their standards, and they are specifically including ROI in their accreditation standards, meaning schools are going to have to actively address that issue, and use, I assume, reference reliable data sources and like actually spell out the rationale of like what students are spending a lot of time and money here. So what are they getting for that investment? Which I think is a good thing. But that's slow. It's kind of slow to catch up, and of course, a lot of schools have to close or will close in the meantime, and that's why it's so important for students to be informed and to ask the right questions, and to look at the ROI and the career outcomes. Um, so last topic is like what's even possible at this point, like how can we salvage the good things in acupuncture and naturopathic medicine, um, keep the access available without exploiting new students and without having new graduates that are just um, in this financially toxic situation, um, because they wanted to go through these programs. Um, in Oregon, we are trying to open up a parallel pathway, um, outside of just an ACOM accredited program, because those programs have to be master's degrees. They have to be, well, they are mostly master's degrees and they mostly are 3-year degrees. So the price point of that is just unrealistic at this point. And I think everybody is catching on to that. And ACOM did release 3 proposals, 2 of which still had the master's degree, but one of which involved the bachelor's degree. The master's degree solution, I don't think solves the earnings test problem because you're still compared to bachelor's degree. If you had a bachelor's degree, then you would just be compared to a high school diploma. You would have access to undergraduate credit prices and you would have access to Pell Grants. And so you can imagine that type of program in a larger institution. You can imagine that being viable, and you can imagine it being worth the institution's time to run that program. Um, but however, that would take several years to develop. Um, I think ACOM would have to get approval to accredit bachelor's degrees. And currently the only way to take the main way to take the national exam is by graduating from an ACOM program. So the national exam is kind of part of the whole regulatory monopoly also. So that would probably have to change and open up. And so there's all these like bureaucratic huge pieces that have to be changed and revised. And that timeline is, we're talking 2 years, 3 years, and yet the loan caps are starting in July, less than a month. The earnings test is coming in July 2027, so it's coming up on about a year to go for that one. And then, like I said, if you fail the earnings test, then you just have 120 days to make a decision about the teach out. So all that's going to happen far before any of these alternative educational pathways get going. Now, so I'm part of the Acupuncture Workforce Alliance. We developed a proposal for the Acupuncture Advisory Committee that's part of the Oregon Medical Board. And so that committee met yesterday and had a meeting, and I'm not totally sure what the result was. It seemed like they said, well, we want to gather more information, which is good. I'm not sure what all that means and who's going to be responsible for doing that work. There was already a ton of work done on to compose the proposal and make a presentation, and nothing. The basic reality of the federal environment is pretty well established and in motion. So the problem is pretty clear. Like, the problem is defined. People just don't like the solution to the problem. And I think a lot of acupuncturists and naturopaths want to somehow maintain the status quo system, even as the whole funding foundation shifts. And so I think it takes a while to understand that that's not going to be possible. yeah, we want nice things, right? We want to have high quality training. We want safe and effective entry level practitioners. Um, but the issue is who's going to pay for it, because it's been based on the federal government fronting the money and then that money never being paid back for most of the people who take out the loans. So that's the actual problem to focus on is, how do we make these programs affordable, and then how do we have a jobs pipeline so that people can achieve gainful employment soon after graduation, um, which uh, I think might become more difficult as fewer people enter the programs. As the number of people goes down, that then decreases the the possibilities, because the scale of the number of recent graduates going down, then your number of licensed practitioners is going down as people retire or just stop practicing. Um, so yeah, it's a real puzzle to figure out. We'll see how it works out. The acupuncture advisory committee only meets every 6 months, so we got um, next meeting is in December. They can meet more often than that, but so far it's looks like the plan is for December. And I think uh, maybe people just have to see some of the bad results, um, you know, actually starting to hit before they're ready to make a make a bolder change. And that's kind of, I guess, the maybe an overall human um, nature lesson that we can all take from this is groups generally don't change until they have to, and prevention is difficult, even though an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You know, people would often groups will wait um, until the crisis has hit, until they actually feel the effects of a crisis. And then at that point, unfortunately, it takes a lot of very quick effort to to stabilize things, and it's probably going to look very different than what the current status quo is. But I'll be here kind of talking about that. You can stay current on everything by subscribing to Debt by Natural Causes. I do free posts like this, and then I do some paid content also for subscribers. So things are going to just keep advancing and getting more clear leading up to the July 2027 earnings test. Um, and again, I would really warn people about the dangers of private student loans on top of maxed out federal loans. Um, these programs really need to get new students in, so I think we all need to protect each other and share facts and data and just approach things rationally and soberly, and let's build some educational structures that don't rely on exploiting students as part of their business model. Let's find a different way, and let's find hopefully some ways to salvage the good things outside of these containers that are kind of falling apart as we watch them over the next few years. All right. Well, I'll be in touch soon.